Not necessarily. Well, good evening, everybody. Hey, Holly, how are you? Living the dream. If you ever tell me something other than living the dream, you're going to throw me off. Hey, Randy, turn me down just a little bit. Randy said, with pleasure. Randy's back there learning live stream and all that kind of good stuff. And I told Ejer, I said, don't show him where the zap button is. If I start developing a tick, you know that he's learned the zap button. Happy birthday, Seth. What number is it? A lot less than me, brother. A lot less than me. Now, this is what's scary. This is what's scary. And I consider myself a young man, but I'm old enough to be his daddy. Oh, that makes me feel better because a lot of you are old enough to be my daddy and my mama. Yeah. There you go. There you go. The sister I never had. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Y'all are going to be my adoptive parents and siblings anyway, right? Right. All right. We have made it all the way to Genesis 42. How many chapters does the book of Genesis have? Let me look real quick. How many? 50. So what does that mean? We are getting very, very close to completing this. Matter of fact, I think that we might be able to do it in the next 4 weeks, okay? And I'm going to tell you why. We're going to group some chapters together because they go together. And I could have literally grouped chapter 42 all the way through chapter 45 because that's where the story is connected. But I really wanted to introduce chapter 42 to you tonight. But we actually started, I was looking back at my notes, we actually started, I think, the last Wednesday night in February of 2020. So we started our study of Genesis pre-pandemic, okay? And then mid-March, we had to go to Zoom, which I'll be honest with you, I hated. You know, and I know that many of you jumped on the Zoom call and participated part of that, and I appreciate that. But again, I hate doing that. You do what you got to do when you have to do it. But think about where we've been in the book of Genesis thus far. If we can just kind of summarize where we've been and where we're going over the next several weeks as we complete this wonderful, wonderful book. Does anybody remember what the book of Genesis means? The beginning. It's the book of beginnings. Now think about this. How critically important the book of Genesis is to not just life in general, but also to the rest of the Bible. Because in Genesis chapter 1 and 2, what account do we read about? Creation. We find how everything came into existence. And the Bible says in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Verse 2 says the earth was without form, was void and without form, and how God gave it not only life and light, okay? And then you get into, so we saw the creation story, and then when you get into the back half of Genesis chapter 2, definitely into Genesis chapter 3, what's that story about? Well, you got Adam and Eve. But specifically, chapter 3, what happens in chapter 3? No, that's chapter 4. What happens before Cain and Abel come along? We see the fall, right? The fall. Remember that? Where Satan forms himself into one of Holly's favorite creatures, a snake, right? Definitely not one of Brother Bill's favorite creatures. You wouldn't have seen if I would have been Adam and Eve, but you know they were made perfect, and so there was no reason to be fearful of snakes. But if the creation story and the fall of man story, if that created the fear of snakes in my heart, my mind, then man, God bless me. Okay, I just do not like snakes. Rubber snakes, live snakes. The only good snake is this, one that's dead and one that's 1,000 miles from here. Okay, I just don't. I know, I don't like them, period. So, and I know that DJ says, they're harmless. Some of them are harmless, whatever. To each their own. Don't come around with me, snakes. I don't play, okay? I'm not a violent man, but I can be. And all of God's people said. Amen. So we saw the creation in chapters 1 and 2. We see the fall of man in chapter 3. In fact, we see the very first moral sin in chapter 4. Sharon, what was that about? Cain and Abel, right? Cain was killed his brother Abel. And then you come into Genesis 5 through 11. We begin to see the fallout effect of the fall, because sin nature is now within every human being that's ever been born into this world. And you'll know that the world became very corrupt, and God finally said, I've had enough, and he sends a flood. But before he sends a flood, he raises up an individual to do what? A guy by the name of Moses, right? No, I said if y'all were listening. Noah, right? So he gives the commission of Noah to build an ark for the flooding of the earth. And so Noah and his family are preserved along with 2 of every animal, right? And then after the flood, so think about this, the first 11 chapters of the book of Genesis covers a period of about 2,000 years. And then when you come to Genesis chapter 12, you won't cover another 2,000 years until you go from Genesis chapter 12 to the end of the Old Testament. So think about that. So you come to Genesis chapter 12, and now it becomes like a snail's pace, because not only you talked about creation, the fall, and the flood, now in Genesis chapter 12, what significant event happens? I thought somebody said it. The promise of what? Not just the land, but what else? Come on, you're right there, Tara. You can do it. The covenant, right? The covenant with who? Abraham. Okay, we're first introduced to him as Abram. Later on, his name would be changed to Abraham, okay, and his wife Sarai, whose name would be changed to Sarah. And so we see the covenant. Now, again, here's the thing about the covenant. He did covenant with a man named Abram, who would later become Abraham. And this covenant would be, hey, I'm going to make you the father of many nations. I'm going to bless you, and you in turn are going to be a blessing to the rest of the world. Out of you is going to be a blessing to the rest of the world. Now think about that. From Genesis 12, we see Abraham, and then from Abraham, that covenant is passed on to Ishmael, right? No. It goes on to Isaac, okay, Isaac, and then from Isaac to Jacob, okay, not Esau, but Jacob. And Jacob has how many sons? 12. And so from one of those sons is Joseph. And this is who we've been studying for the last several weeks, beginning all the way back in chapter 37 of the book of Genesis, and really carries us through the rest of the book of Genesis about this man named Joseph. So think about this. Nearly 25 chapters relate to, not necessarily 25 chapters, nearly 25% of the book of Genesis is dedicated to Joseph. Now that brings us to Genesis 42, okay? Genesis 42. Now, here's what I want you to know by way of introduction. I think it'd be worth your while to record this so that one of these days I'm dead and gone and you've come back to study the book of Genesis and you're looking through your notes and I remember Brother Bill telling me this, that from Genesis 37 to where we're introduced to Joseph, anybody remember how old he was?
17.
He was, again, he's that trivia question. He's answered a trivia question. The very first teenager mentioned in the Bible. He was how old, Sam? 17, okay. Remember what happened? Remember he dreamed a dream. Matter of fact, he had two dreams. Remember that? He dreamed about, Janice is not here to make fun of me. She thought I said cheese. I said sheaves. Okay. He saw plants growing, and what he saw was one plant was bowing down to another plant. And so Then he had another dream about the sun, the moon, and the stars. And here's the thing about it. I pointed this out to you when we looked at that both Joseph's brothers and his father, they needed no interpretation to that dream. They knew right away what he was talking about. So you're saying that one of these days we are going to serve you? You remember what that happens? And we discovered that Joseph was Jacob's favorite son. As a matter of fact, he was given a significant gift. Anybody remember what that was? A coat of many colors. And so he sent Joseph out to check on the brothers one day, and he's wearing the coat of many colors. And hey, Pops sent me out here to check on you, and they thought, man, here's our moment. We can get rid of him. Remember that? And so they initially thought they were just going to kill him. We'll just go ahead and nip that dream in the bud right now, if I can say that in a Barney Fife tone. Just nip it in the bud right now, take care of it. Remember, who was it that stood up for him and said, no, we can't do that? Was it Reuben or was it Judah? I think it was Judah. I mean, now, I'm going to go home and look at it and think, no, it was Reuben. But I think it was Judah that stood up for him and said, no, we can't do that, okay? Maybe it was Reuben. I'm not sure. I don't remember. It'll come back to me in a minute. If some of you want to go back and look that up and correct me. And so what did they end up doing? They ended up throwing him in a pit and thinking, well, I'll tell you what, we'll just leave him there. And then it may have been one of them said, no, we can't even leave him there. We've got to do something about it. It was Reuben. Okay, thank you. I think it was Judah who said, hey, if we're going to do something with him, it'll make a profit off of him. So they sold him to a band of Ishmaelites. They sold him into slavery, who eventually took him to the slave market in Egypt, made it in the slave market, sold a guy by the name of Potiphar, a high-ranking official under Pharaoh, bought him and made him a servant in his own house, served there 2 or 3 years. Potiphar's wife made advances toward him. He rejected those advances, and then what happened? Put him in jail for a number of years, up to 10 years. Remember that? Then he interpreted 2 dreams, the dream of the butler and the dream of the baker. Now, y'all stay with me. I'm going somewhere with this. He interpreted those dreams, and one of them was a good turnout, the other one not so good. The guy was executed. And so the butler is restored to his position and thinking, hey, when you go back, remember me. And several years went by, and he'd forgot about him. And then all of a sudden, this is what's bringing us up to where we are today, Pharaoh, the high-ranking poopah, if you will, the grand poopah of Egypt, the king of Egypt, has 2 dreams that really, really trouble him. Remember what the dreams were? He dreamed about some cows. Remember this, coming up out of the river. What were about those cows? How many of them were there? Well, there were 7, right? 7 good cows and 7 really porous-looking cows. And who ended up doing damage to who? The 7 skinny, dreadful-looking cows ended up eating the good-looking cows. And then you remember the second dream was he dreamed about some corn or a field, some plants growing up, and that the porous-looking plants, 7 of those would destroy the 7 good ones. Remember what the interpretation of the dream was? The interpretation of the dream was, look, over the next 14 years, there's going to be 7 really, really, really good years, but followed by the 7 good years are going to be some very, very bad years. As a matter of fact, the bad years are going to make the good years look really, really bad, because the 7 years are going to basically destroy our country if we don't set some back in preparation for that. And Pharaoh says, you know what? I appreciate you interpreting that dream and giving me some heads up about that. And he acknowledges this is God's doing. As a matter of fact, Joseph makes that knowledge as well. God giving me that interpretation. This is not a private interpretation. God gave that to me. And so he puts Joseph now second in command. Matter of fact, he's even got Pharaoh's ring, which carries all authority throughout Egypt. And that brings us to our text today, okay? I appreciate y'all bearing with me with that summary. Here's what I want to do. Let me read verses 1 through 8, and then we'll come back and we'll begin to unpack it a little bit. So you just follow along as I read aloud, okay? This is Genesis 42, verses 1 through 8. Let me point out something to you that I want you to make a note of. When Jacob saw, okay, here we're hearing from Jacob again. When Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, why do you look at one another? Now let me pause here. And this is very obvious that now we are in the early to middle stages of the famine, okay? Because Jacob is now turning to his sons, his remaining sons. Now, again, he's under the impression that Joseph is dead, okay? And so he's convinced of that, and he's thinking, you know what? Things are really, really bad where we are right now. Hey, boys, why don't you go to Egypt and buy some food? Verse 2, and he said, indeed, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Now, watch this. Go down to that place and buy for us there that we may live and not die. So here's why we know, without a doubt, that we are in the early to middle stages of the famine during this time. So look at verse 3. So Joseph's 10 brothers, now how many brothers did he have? I'm getting all kinds of numbers. He had 11 because there's 12 boys, right? So he would have 10 older brothers, then it would be Joseph, and then they had a little brother by the name of Benji, right? Or Benjamin, right? Verse 4. So verse 3, so Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. Verse 4, but Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers. Now mark this statement. For he said, lest some calamity befall him. Okay, just mark that. I'm going to come back and talk about that in just a moment. And the sons of Israel went to buy grain among those who journeyed, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. So the famine was not just in Canaan, not just in Egypt. It was in the surrounding regions as well. And so Jacob has sent his 10 sons to go buy grain in Egypt in order that they might live and not die. And one of the boys that he did not send was Benjamin, lest he find some calamity and befall him too. Because remember, the last time he sent out a son, he didn't come back, right? So verse 6. Now Joseph, now watch this. Now Joseph, he's no longer in prison. Joseph was governor over the land. And it was he who sold, now watch this, to how many of the people? To all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down before him with their faces to the earth. But look, pay close attention to verse 7. Here's what it says. And Joseph saw who? His brothers, and what did he do? He recognized them, and now watch this. He, that is Joseph, acted as a stranger to who? To them. Not only did he act as a stranger to them, even though he recognized them, he also spoke roughly to them. Then he said to them, where do you come from? And they said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. And then look at verse 8. So Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Why do you think that is? Well, think about it. The last time they saw him, and Holly's right, the last time they saw him, he was 17 years of age.
Yeah, and he's dressed very well.
Yeah, he would obviously be in Egyptian garb.
And dressed like an Egyptian. It had been several years, and he was a man by now. He was a kid when they last saw him.
Yeah, so he's roughly 37 or a little older. And you say, well, where do you come up with that number? Well, think about this. He was 17, right, when he was sold into slavery. He was 30 when he appeared to Pharaoh, right? And then you add the 14 years of the famine, which would put him at 44, roughly. 7 good. Well, yeah, we're not into the back half of the famine, so we're looking at maybe 10 years. Okay, so 30, that would put him at 40, right? Am I doing my math right? 37, that's 37 plus 2 or 3 might make him 38, 39, or 40, somewhere in there, okay? So that would be at least 23 years has passed, okay? 20 to 23 years. So we could say 20 plus, okay? So no doubt that he had changed quite a bit, but again, they also thought he was dead. They weren't expecting. You say, well, where do you get that? Well, look at, let's see, I think I wrote this down. Chapter 44 and verse 20. Genesis 44 and verse 20. When they went to Egypt, they weren't expecting to see him. You say, why do you say that? Look at chapter 44, verse 20. And it says, and this is Judah talking, okay? Let me begin in verse 18 just for context purpose. And then Judah came near to him and said, he's talking to Joseph, he says, "Oh, my Lord, please let your servant speak a word in my Lord's hearing, and do not let your anger burn against your servant, for you are even like Pharaoh. My Lord asked his servant, saying, have you a father or a brother? And we said to my Lord, we have a father, an old man, and a child of his child of his old age, who is young, and his brother is dead." So they are presuming that even though we sold him into slavery, no doubt he didn't survive that. Okay, so they're presuming after all these years that he is dead as well, and so they're not expecting to see him. So that's another reason why that they did not recognize him, because they were not in anticipating seeing him. Okay, so absolutely, especially not a a prime minister, for lack of better ways of putting it, somebody of in high authority. Certainly wouldn't have expected that. Okay, so we're going to give them a pass on not recognizing him. And it is said that that the human body changes about every 5 years. That if you take a picture today and then look at it again in 5 years, you'll begin to see a change in how you look. Either you've gotten heavier, you've gotten lighter, you've gotten wrinkles, or your skin's tightened up. Whatever it may be. Or all the above, or maybe even none of the above. I don't know. And so you kind of get that. But they say about every 5 years we change, okay? Maybe to change the way we look, our styles, what have you. Well, with that thought in mind, now let's begin to fill in those blanks. I know that's what y'all are anxious to do anyway. I want to begin looking in verses 1 through 7. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I've kind of dealt with the introductory part anyway. I want to think with me just briefly about Joseph's conduct. Joseph's conduct, and I really want to zero in on verse 7, okay? If you go back to verse 3 and 4, it says that, so Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. Verse 4, but Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, lest some calamity befall him. Now think about this. Not only was Jacob concerned about Joseph being, you know what, this is my baby now, okay, and if I send him off and something were to happen to him, then I wouldn't have any more young children. But here's something else that I think is very significant here, a major reason why he didn't send Benjamin, because if Joseph is dead, then that means that Benjamin is the last tie to Rachel. Remember, Rachel was the favorite of the two wives. Remember that? And so if Benjamin dies, because again, he thinks that Joseph is already dead, then all of my ties, all of my connection to Rachel are now gone. And so he's going to protect Benjamin at all costs to keep that tie alive, so to speak. But then look at verse 7. Here's what's interesting when you think about Joseph's conduct. And maybe we can spare a few minutes to discuss this. Joseph saw his brothers, and again, he recognized them. Now, why do you think that he recognized them? Probably had not changed that much, but could it also be that he was expecting them? Yeah. Say it again. That's kind of where I was going with that, Holly. I don't know if y'all heard what Holly said. She said, I don't think I would forget somebody who sold me into slavery.
I've seen classmates that I hadn't seen in 40 years.
Yeah. And I think Sam is right. I think Holly is right. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. But I was just kind of thinking outside the box that, because he obviously knew that this famine was happening, not just here, but surely enough, if there was anybody still alive among his family, that they were going to have to come. Because again, where are they going to get food? There was no Walmart in Canaan. They were going to get food. They had to come through him. So I think he was somewhat expecting them to come. And the day that they did show up, now here's what's interesting. We think about his conduct. Joseph saw his brothers. He recognized them. Now watch this. Why didn't he say, and we'll talk about this when we get to the second point, why didn't he say, guys, it's me. Joey, Joseph. Why do you think he didn't say that? Why do you think that he continued to hide his identity and to act as if he was a stranger to them, as if he had never met them before?
Yeah.
But he wanted to also see if they have changed.
You've been reading my notes.
You too. No, read it.
Do what now? Maybe. I kind of thought about that too. But would that almost be out of character for Joseph? When you think about character, I don't know if y'all heard what Sharon said. Was this part of, hey, I'm getting my pound of flesh, before we do the reveal, if you will. Now, I think it had, I don't know that any of us, and this is all due respect to all of you, and maybe I shouldn't say us, maybe I should say me, that I don't know that I would be so quick to, as Holly said a while ago, about how can you forget somebody sold you into slavery? How would you, you think about all the things that he's endured up to this point. Not just being sold into slavery, but being away from the family for all of these years, going to prison for all of these years, and going through all of this heartache, one after another, just one setback after another, and thinking, man, I just can't forget about that quick. You ever heard this statement? I know that you have. I may forgive, but I won't forget. Well, that's actually true because you and I don't have it within us to forget, okay? They say that 95% of everything that we see, we experience, we read, we hear is stored in our subconscious mind and capable of coming up at any moment. You ever think about something out of the blue and think, man, I've not thought about that in years? That's because it's all stored in your subconscious mind. And so... Yeah. Again, they presumed he's dead, and he was dressed not what they were expecting him to do. And I thought, and again, it could be any number of things. Huh? I don't think there's any doubt about it. Yeah. And he hasn't forgotten his dream. The dream didn't just say, well, I guess it's just not meant to be. I think he still believed that dream was from God. Okay? And it's about to be played out right before him. That's exactly right. But here's what's interesting. Okay, it's one thing to say that he acted like a stranger to them, but then look at the middle part or the last part of verse 7, and it says that he spoke roughly to them. Okay, you might even say spoke down to them in a way. Why do you think that? Why do you think he went that route? Has Joseph suddenly become a man that doesn't have integrity? Has Joseph's his kind-hearted spirit, he's been good to everybody else that he's worked with and served along with. Why is he now speaking roughly to them?
I don't think he wanted them to recognize.
Yeah, and I think, I've heard what Holly said. She said that she didn't think that he wanted them to recognize. I think that's, and here's what I wrote down in my own notes. I think this is all part of the plan. This is all part of the plan because, and we're going to see this in this next major point, when we think about not only Joseph's conduct, but then verses 8 through 24, we see Joseph's consideration. Joseph's consideration. And again, I asked that question, why did Joseph not reveal himself to his brothers right away? And all of you, many of you have given great answers, and I think that none of them are wrong. I think they're absolutely not only probable, but they're good answers. But let me give you the two that I'm going to go with tonight because I think they are critical to our understanding of the entire story and what God's doing here and how God is using Joseph. Now remember, when we come to the end of the book of Genesis, Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, I believe it is, when Joseph made his big reveal and he makes this statement to his own brothers, his dad's getting ready to die, and his dad's already passed, but Joseph's getting ready to die. He makes this incredible statement to his brothers. He said, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Okay? And so I think this is all part of the plan. Again, I've got to keep them at bay. I can't reveal myself to them just yet because there's some things that need to take place not only in their lives, and Barbara, you've been all over it tonight on this, talking about, and you too, Joel, about hey, I'm going to see if there's really been a change in their life, and if there's been any humility there. Okay, we're going to see that in just a moment. But Joseph's got some things to work out in his own life too, and you're going to see that in just a moment too. So let's begin in verse 8. We're thinking about Joseph's consideration. It says, and Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Again, they did not recognize him because they certainly weren't expecting him to be there in that moment. Again, they presumed that he was dead. Now look what happens in verse 9. This is where it gets a little strange. If you just read verse 9 through 23, you'll think, man, what did I miss here? Verse 9 says, then Joseph remembered the dreams. I told y'all they did. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamed about them and said to them, now this is part of the plan. He's role-playing here. He's saying to his brothers, look, you are spies. You've come to see the nakedness of the land. You've seen how bad things are right here, and some other nation has sent you to spy us out to see if we were ready or primed for the taking. Okay, does that make sense? Now, is that true? No. Did Joseph really believe that? No. He obviously knows what the truth is because he knows who his brother is, and so he is setting the stage. This is all part of the plan. Verse 10. And they said to him, no. They're going, I'm sure that kind of freaked them out, thinking, we came here just to buy food. We didn't come here to spy. So they said to him, no, my lord, but your servants have come to buy food. And we are one man's sons. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies. But he said to them, no, but you have come to see the nakedness of the land. And they said, your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And I missed this verse. And in fact, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more. So here's another verse that gives a proof text, if you will, that they believe that Joseph was dead. One is no more. But Joseph said to them, Joseph's not having any of that. Verse 14, again, this is all part of the role play. This is all part of the plan. But Joseph said to them, it is as I spoke to you, saying you are spies. In other words, Joseph is not going to take no for an answer when he asks the question, are you spies? They go, no, not even close to that. But Joseph basically deems them as spies. And look what he does. Verse 15. In this manner you shall be tested. Okay, if you're not spies, here's what we're going to do. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not leave this place. Now watch this. Unless who? Your younger brother comes here. Now why is he being incessant on about seeing Benjamin, or them bringing Benjamin? He wants to see him. Now think about this. Of all of the 12 brothers, Benjamin is the only one who is full blood. Right? Huh? And very much innocent. That's exactly right, E.J. Verse 16. So here's what we'll do. Send one of you and let him bring your brother, and you shall be kept in prison, that your words may be tested to see whether there is any truth in you, or else the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. And look what he did. He put them all together in prison for how many days? 3 days. Now, I would have been saying, now see how it feels. But that's my flesh getting the best of me. But after 3 days, so he puts them in prison for 3 days. Okay, again, this is all part of the plan, verse 18. And I think what Joseph is doing by putting them in prison, I think he's wanting his brothers to know, look, I mean business. I'm not playing games with you here, okay? Verse 18, then Joseph said to them, the third day, do this and live. Now watch this. Joseph makes this declaration, for I fear God. Now that's going to be another statement that you wouldn't expect to come out of the mouth of an Egyptian. The Egyptians were very much self-dependent. Verse 19. He says, okay, if you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined. Okay, I'm going to use one of your brothers as a ransom, for lack of better ways of putting it. If you really are honest men, if you really are who you say you are, then let one of your brothers be confined to your prison house, that is this prison house. But you go and carry grain for the famine of your house. That is, you carry what you came to do. You take it back to your home. But here's what you need to do. One's going to remain here in prison as a ransom, okay? Or what's the term that we use? You could say hostage. Collateral. Thank you, Bill. That's the word I was looking for. He's going to be used as collateral, okay, for the rest of them coming back. So he couldn't say, okay, if I take you at your word that you'll come back, knowing you like I do, you may not come do that. Okay, thinking, man, that dude's not somebody to be dealt with. We're not going back there. So they use one of the brothers as collateral. Now watch this. The collateral to do what? Verse 20. And bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified, and you shall not die. And what they do? And they did so. Do you think that Joseph has their undivided attention? Oh, yeah. Look at this. So they're gathered together. They're in their little holy huddle. Now watch this. They think, again, that Joseph is an Egyptian. And so therefore he speaks Egyptian. Therefore he does not speak Hebrew. So look at what they do. Verse 21. Then they said to one another, we are truly guilty concerning our brother, for we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear. Therefore this distress has come upon us. Now they're really having those guilt feelings about what they did to Joseph. Yeah, verse 22 says, and Reuben answered them, saying, guys, did I not speak to you, saying, do not sin against the boy? But you would not listen. Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us. It's now all come full circle back to us. Now here's verse 23. I find it very interesting. But they did not know that Joseph understood them. So they're speaking in Hebrew, which was the language of the Hebrew people. They're speaking in Hebrew. They have no clue that he's able to answer or understand them. Because when Joseph spoke to them, he had an interpreter. He probably had a servant or a slave that spoke to the brothers in Egyptian. And then look at verse 24. I find this very interesting. I want you to put in the margins of your Bible or in your notes somewhere as it relates to verse 24. And it says, and he turned himself away from them. And what did he do? Who's the one who turned away and wept? It's Joseph. Then he returned to them again, talked with them, and he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. And so Simeon is what is he in the rank and file of the brothers? He's the oldest. Simeon is the oldest, is he not? Is Reuben the oldest?
I remember Reuben is the one told him, no, let's don't kill him.
Those brothers start to run together after a while. So, yeah, you got that many. Okay, all right. Simeon's definitely one of the brothers. That much we do know. And maybe I'm off base here. And so he's the one that's used as the collateral. Okay. Now, why did Joseph not reveal himself? Why was he so harsh to his brothers? Why has he gone this route? And I think there are two major reasons why. Number one, because of the timing of his favor. Because of the timing of his favor. Now, remember this, very important, that Joseph is not a simple curator of a food pantry. He is a dignitary. He is, in essence, the prime minister of Egypt. We do know this, that Pharaoh made this statement when he gave the position that he gave to Joseph, that he said, you'll be basically as high as I am. The only person that you'll actually have to answer to is me. So you're basically in second command in all of Egypt, okay? And so now Joseph is going to test just how, if any, his brothers had changed in the last 20 plus years. Now keep in mind, when they sold him into slavery, they were pretty cocky. They were pretty arrogant. They were pretty rough. I mean, think about it. I mean, how bad must it be? How bad must you be if you are going to sell? I mean, think about killing your brother, let alone putting him and selling him on an open slave market. And don't let this fall on deaf ears, or make sure you understand this, that Joseph had the power, if he wanted to just speak a word, and he could have loaded down his brothers with enough grain to last for years and years and years and years and years and years and years to come. He had that kind of authority. But what good would that have done for his brothers? Especially if they hadn't changed. I mean, think about it. If he would have loaded them down with grain and all of the resources that they needed, and they continued to be rough and arrogant, they would not show any gratitude. In fact, most people I know like that would come to, hey, Joseph, you owe us. We're your people. You now owe it to us. No remorse whatsoever, right? So if he would have given them all that he had the authority to do, it could have been catastrophic for them.
But he wanted to see Benjamin. He had to.
Oh yeah, that's again part of the plan, and we're going to see that in this next point. That was part of the plan, right? Let me ask you this: Have any of you ever somebody ever come to give you and ask you for money or for some type of resource, and they gave you a sad story, and you just felt, man, I feel sorry for you, and so you helped them, only later to discover that was a ripoff or a scam? I still can't get over, I'm guessing this probably would have been 2014. I hadn't been here maybe not even a year yet. And I remember, I think it was Tanya, Trina, and I were in the office on that particular day. And I remember a lady coming up, and she was in a white vehicle. Some of you remember this. It may have been some of y'all that went with us that day. And the hard luck story was something like this, that she was from the Groves area, Port Neches, the Groves area, and that she had an abusive husband. She was on the run, trying to stay at a woman's shelter, but she'd gotten temporary housing right back over here on Stone's Throw, and had no gas and no food, and she was trying to find a place of solitude away from her husband. Man, I bought that story hook, line, and sinker. I remember we went down here, or I did personally, went down here and bought her a full tank of gas. I had Tanya send out an email to our church thinking, she's got some little bitty children that need diapers. I mean, we bought baby food. I think the church ended up spending close to $500 or $600, just individual members bringing stuff. I mean, I was blown away with how giving our people were. And I remember thinking, okay, hey, do you want to come get this food? And then she said, hey, it'll probably be an hour before I get there. I said, where are you staying? I'll just bring it to you. Well, me and I think about 4 or 5 others, Dale, I can't remember a few words, because just down the street from where Dale and Pam lived, we took it to their home, and when we get there, there are no children. And she said that they're staying with a neighbor. I'm thinking, okay. But there are 2 men there. I'm thinking, 2 full-grown men there. And I remember asking her what her husband's name was. And so as we're taking the food in, this guy's helping us go in. I said, hey, by the way, my name is Bill Coffey. I'm pastor at Pinecrest. What is your name? And he gives us a name, and I'll give you 3 guesses, and the first 2 don't count, who he was. He was the husband. I didn't say anything, but I thought, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And sure enough, about a month passes away, and they call, or she does, wanting more help. And then I bust her chops with what I found out that night. Now, here's what's not funny in the story, but it's kind of ironic. It probably wasn't maybe a month after that he had a wreck out here on the bypass, totaled that vehicle. I mean, he survived, thank God, but I was just thinking, you reap what you sow, right? You reap what you sow. And so I'll be honest with you. There are times, and I can give you story after story, and I don't want to get bogged down in this, but I can give you story after story about when I was at my last church. Even a son of a member of our church that scammed the church. Now, the dad didn't know anything about it because I never told the dad about it. But I'm just thinking, that's what makes this life very, very hard, because I have a soft heart. I really do. And I don't know of anybody that has a soft heart like Tanya does. Tanya is very sensitive to that, and I'm grateful to the Lord for her and her sensitivity. But she and I were talking about that days and weeks after that, thinking, man, it's hard to want to help somebody because you really have no way of proving their story, okay? But then I'm reminded of this: as you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it unto the Lord. So if we're doing it with a good conscience, Lord, and again, sometimes God says, you know what, you don't need to go down that path. I've had times like that too. I'm sure you had. But if you feel like, you know what, Lord, we're going to do this because we're doing this as unto you. If they're going to scam us, God will let you take care of that, right? I don't even know where I went down that path, but anyway. But not only was it the timing of his favor, okay, this had to be played out in order to see if they changed and to make sure that Benjamin was brought to him. But not only that, watch this. Not only the timing of his favor, but also the taming of his feelings. The taming of his feelings. Because when you think about this, when you read verses 9 through 23 and how rough he was, especially in the fact that he put them in jail for 3 days, he accused them of being spies, you would almost, if you were quick to judge. By the way, how many of you are sarcastic by nature? I was just wondering who my club was. I'm just wondering who my club was. Okay, so we're all in the same club. Okay, I can be sarcastic with the worst of them. So we think about Joseph, but up until this point, isn't this out of character for Joseph from what we read about him so far? For him to go this route, to speak to them roughly and to accuse them of being spies, and when they are very adamant that they're not spies, and he goes, oh yeah, you are spies. In fact, I'm going to put you to the test. I'm going to put you to the test. I'm going to put you in jail for 3 days. And then I'm going to use one of your brothers as collateral. Does this seem almost out of character for Joseph? Do you think he cared for his brothers? Yeah, I think that's all part. But again, this is all part of the plan. But I think when you think about it, he had to tap the brakes on his own emotions. Because how easy would it have been for him to say, hey guys, it's me, it's Joseph, don't you remember me? It'd been very easy for him to do that because I think he loved his brothers in spite of what they did to him. Not just Benjamin, I think he loved Reuben and Simeon and Levi and so on and all the other ones. I think he loved them. In fact, how do you know that? Look at here in verse 24. It says that he turned his back to them, okay, he turned away from them and he began to weep because he didn't want them to see him crying. And by the way, this is not the last time that you'll see him crying. Look at chapter 43. We're almost done. Genesis 43, verse 30. Genesis 43, verse 30 says, and now his heart yearned for his brother, that is Joseph, toward Benjamin. So Joseph made haste and sought somewhere to weep, and he went into his chamber and wept. Look at chapter 45 and verse 14. Moreover, he kissed all his brothers, and what did he do? He wept over them, and after that his brothers talked with him. Joseph's an emotional guy. Joseph is an emotional guy. And so he's having to tap the brakes with his own emotions. Have any of you ever made an emotional decision that you regretted? Randy, I'm right there with you, brother. Sometimes we have to keep our emotions in check because sometimes our emotions can lead us astray. And so think about this. This is what Joseph's having to do, not only because of the timing of his favor, is all part of the plan, but also the taming of his feelings. He had to tap those brakes to get control because he does not want to make a rational, emotional decision here.
Well, he probably thought his brothers hated him too. And now here they're saying this.
Yeah. Yeah. Have y'all forgotten about me until I brought up, do you have any family? It could be any number of things, right?
Well, again, they thought he was dead,
Yeah.
and they had no idea that an Egyptian with the authority to kill them would actually be their little brother from way back.
Yeah. Yeah.
But not only that, but back before that, anytime anybody meets in Egypt, any of these brothers, shivers went up and down their spine.
Oh, yeah, don't you know it?
Yeah, especially when the father told them to go
Yeah.
I can only imagine what was going through.
Yeah. And if you've read this story, and I trust that every single one of you have at some time or another, you either read it or had it preached to you, you'll know the story, because after he sends the other brothers back, remember what he does? He gives them the grain, but then he puts money in their sack, and they're thinking, oh no, now we're going to be accused of stealing. And so again, the fear of what they're capable of doing to us is not good. Yeah. So,
Is this maybe the first time they've really come to grips and regretted what they did to Joseph?
I think so, especially you read verse 22 and 23. Yeah.
Well,
They, if he hadn't have done that, they would have never come to grips and regretted what they've done. Yep, now it's coming back on.
Yeah.
So they have regret.
Yeah, maybe they think they've gotten away with something, and then all of a sudden thinking, we've been able to sleep for the last 5 or 6 years, and now it's haunting us again. Yeah, yeah, that's what Sam is saying. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And yet, we're going to stop right there because we're out of time, okay, and the fact that we're finished with this part 1. And we'll pick up in verse 25 next week. We'll probably get into, and I'm not going to cover every verse in chapter 43, 44, and 45, because then we'll see Joseph, the Benjamin, we'll see all the shenanigans that go on. Joseph putting money in their sacks, and then he puts the cup in the bag, and that's a big no-no, okay? And so that really scares them, especially as it relates to Benjamin. And then how the family makes their way to Egypt. Really, really cool story. Again, the providence of God very much at work here. So where's God in all this? Right where he's always been, on his throne. Where's God in all of our calamities today? Right where he's always been. In fact, Sunday morning, I hope that you're going to be here with us. How many of you, Lord willing, planning on being here? I hope that all of you are going to be here. I'm going to be preaching a message that's going to wrap up our series, God, I Don't Understand, with a message entitled, How Faith Overcomes Fear. How Faith Overcomes Fear. And so pray for me leading up to that. Habakkuk chapter 3 really kind of puts everything into perspective and where we need to be, especially in the day and age which we're living. Prayer requests that you might have tonight. A major answer to prayer